Good afternoon, good morning, or good night. I'm live with my buddy Dave Feldman. We were just talking behind the scenes, and there were so many things that came up where Dave is he's such a good friend to me. He guards our conversations so that we can share them with you guys. He knows like how cool these answers are to some of these questions, and how much you guys would enjoy it. And he really cares about you guys. I was trying to get it all for myself. I was asking him all these questions, and he said, "Hold your horses, Tristan. Don't get your panties in a bunch. We're going live in 10 minutes." But I'm here with Dave Feldman. What's up, Dave?
Oh, what's up with you, Tristan? You having a good day over there?
I am, man. I get to talk to my good friend Dave across the continent, right? Across hemispheres. My kids are out running around doing pottery with their mom, and I'm here in a quiet house. Even my dogs are quiet for some reason, which does make me worry. But yeah, man, nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. We should actually kind of set this up a little bit that you were already asking me, I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks ago, after I'd started the carnivore diet, you were like, I want to talk to you about that,
Yeah.
as you're getting near the end or maybe as a progress update. And it worked out that this is technically the first broadcast since I've completed 28 days of carnivore.
And I love it. So I'm getting a Primal Edge Health exclusive here with cholesterolcode.com's Dave Feldman. If you guys haven't checked out cholesterolcode.com, make sure to check it out. Dave does have a Patreon as well. I mean, he's the experiments that you've been doing, Dave, are mind-boggling. So last time we spoke, we talked about a resistance training experiment that you did on a high-fat diet, how that
Mhm.
affected your lipid panel. Um, since then, you've done some wacky stuff. What the heck have you been up to? What have you been eating, and what have your experiments entailed since then? And if you guys aren't familiar, Dave has been tracking his cholesterol every single day for like how long now?
Well, let's let a little bit of a qualifier there. I track my cholesterol every single day while in an active experiment where I believe it'll be changing fairly rapidly. In the case of this most recent experiment, carnivore, and actually, sorry, let me back up a sec to answer your original question. So, since the resistance training experiment, I did have one other experiment, which was the white bread and processed meat experiment, which I think I also talked to you about
Yeah.
briefly. Then there was really about like a 2 month period where I was practically on tour, if you will, and going around to like week after week after week. I had a conference after conference after conference. So there wasn't an experiment over that period of time.
Hmm.
But I did know that I was rolling into this carnivore experiment soon. So before that, I managed to get like some legit exercise. It's one complaint that I've had is that I've not been able to do like say resistance training
Yeah.
that much because while I'm in the middle of these experiments, I have to keep each day to be very consistent.
Yeah.
And the problem is as I already know from my own experiments, that impacts my lipid numbers. So I got in a phase of that, and then finally, boom, I pulled the trigger on this carnivore experiment, which started out. I said in advance to everybody, look, this is going to be exploratory. I'm going to first see if I can do 30 days of beef only, or for that matter, bovine, I guess you could say. Like I might have
So
beef
other cuts
liver.
of meat. Oh, nice. Some
Right,
liver is allowed.
right. Although I never actually tried beef liver directly yet. I've only had it as liverwurst or pate.
What about, remember when I tried to bully you into making high liver? Have you not done that yet?
Yeah, you've got your work cut out for you because
You haven't
I
even tried liver recently, and you're not about to eat rotten liver anytime soon.
nah,
Okay.
rotten anything. It's gonna be. You have to
What if we call
understand
it
my
liver
wife.
kraut? What if I call it liver kraut? Then would you eat it?
I don't have kraut anything. Like I
Okay.
really don't have a lot of fermented foods in
Yeah.
the first place.
All right.
Um, Not that I think that's a good thing. Just
Yeah.
preference, I guess. The
No,
only reason.
totally. I'm not offended. I'm not pissed off. Whatever. See you later. It's fine.
Yeah, you hide it well. You hide it well.
Yeah. Whatever.
So, so I tell everybody in advance I'm going to try to be beef only, but I don't know. Regardless, I will be carnivore throughout. Right. Now, I get uh 14 days in. No, I'm sorry. I get 10 days into this beef only carnivore experiment. And then the following happens. I get my very first lipid test. I brought my cardio check, and I was going to wait until I was 10 days in. And then I took my lipids upon waking up. It's an important part of the story. I wake up, and my triglycerides are 220.
And that's only on carnivore.
That was a huge alert for me because I have taken waking up cholesterol tests before, and my triglycerides were never like that. Certainly in any data point that I've seen up to this point.
So your normal diet, a ketogenic diet, you take your morning lipids at the same time, you're not seeing nearly that level of triglycerides.
No, in fact, it was notable from the resistance training experiment that there were 3 days in which my waking triglycerides were 130. Okay. And I was like, whoa, this is huge, 130. And then by the 12 hours fasted mark, which is to say that from the meal that I had from the night before, which was always happening at 8 p.m., to 8 a.m. the next day, my triglycerides will have dropped under 100 for each of those 3 times that it was 130.
Yeah.
So I know it's a little weird to say it that way, but basically what I'm saying is as long as 12 hours had passed, my triglycerides would have been under 100 throughout the resistance training experiment.
12 hours from your last meal.
From my last meal. Yeah. But 3 of those times when I took the other one that was in between, which was just after I woke up, we saw that it was 130 for 3 days in a row that just happened to follow the second intervention, which was the heavier workout intervention phase.
Okay, interesting. Now, so slightly elevated triglyceride the day after an intense workout, but still dropping off after that 12-hour mark.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, that was 130, highest I can recall that I've ever seen it on my cardio check, except for any experiments where I introduced carbs. In those experiments, they'd be higher, but for an obvious contextual reason. So, in other words, at no time while I've been on a ketogenic diet and taking a reading with cardio check have I ever seen that I can recall above, say, 140 or 150 for sure. Right. Here I am, I'm looking at not only 220, but I'm immediately excited by it because I'll bet you have a lot of people who follow you who are very low carb, or for that matter, carnivore. We've seen this phenomenon at cholesterolcode.com where some people, it seems to be even a slightly higher proportion who are carnivores, would come and say, whoa, I have super high levels of triglycerides. Why? I'm on like a nearly zero carb diet. I mean, I should see my triglycerides be low like all of my friends who are on this same diet.
I see low triglycerides on keto and carnivore. Like my triglycerides I'm not too, but I'm always at least 12, 16 hours fasted when I do my blood work.
Yes. And this is where it gets interesting. So I then take my blood, I want to say it was about 3.5 hours, 4 hours later, and it's like 86. My triglycerides are 86. So I'm like, tomorrow, which was the day after this first discovery, I'm going to go ahead and take my cholesterol every hour. Yeah. And this, by the way, is a pain in the butt because it's not like a glucose strip. You actually have to fill a capillary tube with your blood.
What's volume? Like how many milliliters
it's
of blood?
40 UL. What is that? Microliters?
Yeah, UL. So it's like in those little insulin needles. It's like 40 of those tick marks.
Yeah, you know what? I actually have one handy. It's these guys.
Yeah.
So about the length of my finger.
Yeah,
right?
that's a deep. You got to go deep for that. You're not gonna smack.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to. I have to move up the Lancer setting so I get a decent poke.
Oh man.
And that's why doing it like every hour, I'm like, crap. I need to be rotating sites and go to different spots. But I wanted to actually graph it, and I did. It precipitously drops up to I want to say 10 hours, 11 hours, but generally by the 12-hour mark it would be below. And then I was like, wow, this is amazing. Let's actually see if this just keeps repeating. If I keep waking up with high triglycerides while doing carnivore beef only, and if it likewise will show that it's under 100 every single time I get to 12 hours. And the answer is yes to both. I kept waking up to high triglycerides, and it would almost invariably drop to under 100 by the 12-hour mark, no matter what I started out with.
Yeah. So it's like
That's
the carnivore dawn phenomenon kind of thing.
Yeah, now I have a theory. My theory is that I'm running. The reason I hadn't seen it before in my prior keto diet is
Mm-hmm.
my prior keto diet still had, even if it was ketogenic, still had higher carbs
Yeah.
by orders of magnitude, right? Like I'm probably, while having beef only, I'm probably two or three carbs, and that's me being conservative and counting the carbs that are actually, within the meat or
Yeah.
possibly in the rub, right?
Yeah.
Which even then, this is going to sound so boring to so many people, but I didn't even allow for spices. I basically just had salt. I had salt on steak, salt on burgers, and I had all beef hot dogs, which, have sodium. And the all beef hot dogs, there are a little bit of other things in the filler, but for the most part, really just not a lot of access to carbs.
Yeah.
So I think I had a lower basal insulin, and I think there was less uptake of the triglycerides on a per particle basis.
Why would there be
Now,
less uptake of triglycerides per particle? What would,
because the dark secret, and a lot of people don't know, is that you still need a little bit of insulin as part of the process by which you're going to hydrolyze a lot of the triglycerides offloading it. So and even then, that's a little bit of an oversimplification. But bottom line is, I do believe that your basal insulin levels will be relevant to triglyceride offloading. I'll put it that way. It's probably the best way I could phrase it. Voila, I end up with, I don't know how many different times I did it, 6 or 7 days in a row, something like that. It happened just about every single day, unless I had a longer span of time from when I last ate to when I went to sleep. But it all still played into the same thing for the most part, is if I had a long enough span of time in which I was both awake and running at my typical metabolic rate, then it made a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that ended up being kind of an experiment that started propping up inside the experiment. So this kind of derailed me a little bit because even though I was going to stay carnivore, I now wanted to bring back the other aspects of what was in the baseline diet that I was using for the resistance training experiment.
Right.
So remember, the resistance training experiment, what I was eating were 3 things only: all beef hot dogs, hard-boiled eggs, and cheese. And here I am in the carnivore experiment where I'm having the beef portion. Granted, it's not just entirely all beef hot dogs, right? So now what happens if I start adding in one at a time the other elements? You see where I'm going?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Will I still see this pronounced rise in the triglycerides? Because maybe it was something else. Maybe.
How long did you go on just carnivore before you decided to start messing around with these other aspects again?
Well, so first of all, some people would say if you're having eggs and cheese, that's still carnivore anyway. So what you mean is, how long did I go beef only carnivore?
Mm-hmm.
That was 16 days. It was supposed to be 14 days, but unfortunately, there was a problem with the blood work. Little side story. I went to a phlebotomist, got stuck 7 times, and they couldn't get a blood draw going.
Because you have such calluses?
No, I think it may have been some mild dehydration on top of it being cold in that phlebotomist office.
Yeah.
On top of it, I'm a nice guy, so I'm going to try to say it wasn't the A-list crew, I think. Like, I've worked with a lot of phlebotomists because I'm kind of a frequent flyer.
Yeah.
And I think they were just they were new in the field.
It was amateur hour at the phlebotomy shop.
Anyway.
I doubt they're watching. You're so diplomatic.
It was New Year's Eve day.
Yeah.
And therefore, I needed to wait 2 days to then go ahead and get the next one. So this is a little side story. I've never been stuck 7 times. And for goodness sake, I've never been stuck so many times and not ended up with vials of blood to send back to the lab. So I was a bit upset about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, didn't matter. Continued it on for 2 more days. And then I added eggs.
How many
Added
eggs?
eggs. It's just ad libitum. I didn't really. I mainly was hitting around, I want to say 2,000 and 2,300 calories, something like that. I
Yeah.
want to say eggs became probably about a third of those calories, roughly, I want to say. And that didn't seem to have much impact on the progression of this stuff that as it was happening. 7 days later, I go ahead and add cheese.
Hmm.
Now, at that point, I recognize that I have an opportunity to go ahead and just synchronize again with the prior baseline diet that I was using in the resistance training experiment to see if I have the likewise results of the high triglycerides
Hmm.
in the morning. Because now I've fully added one more element, and now I'm just going to synchronize. Now the downside is I lose my steaks, I lose my burger patties,
And then what are
but
you eating instead? Instead of steaks and burger patties, what does the diet look like in this period of this experiment?
it's 4 all-beef hot dogs and 2 ounces of Colby Jack cheese at 10 a.m. It's 4 hard-boiled eggs and 4 ounces of Colby Jack cheese at 3 p.m. And then it's 3 hard-boiled eggs and 4 ounces of Colby Jack cheese at 8 p.m. I
Wow.
have That's the baseline diet, and I have eaten exactly that way and exactly that schedule now for both the resistance training experiment and for the last 9 days.
Okay.
Just now. And when I say I've eaten that way for the last 9 days, what I mean is for the last 5 days, coming up to 28 days of carnivore,
Yeah.
I was eating just that, anticipating this little additional experiment that I'm throwing on at the very end, which
Okay.
has to do with adding sugar
So you have another experiment pending that you've
that I'm
already
already
decided to
almost
do.
done with. There's one more day to go.
Okay.
So so look here. I know almost have to draw a map, a flow chart of how everything worked out.
Yeah.
But we're this far along. You're with me on my thinking up to this point,
Yeah.
right?
What I wanted
Here,
to ask you is what were the results now on your washout diet? I guess I'll call it like the washout
yeah.
diet, the bodybuilding diet. Are they different from when you were doing it a month ago before the carnivore experiment?
I haven't done a full analysis on that yet, but the short answer is it appears so.
Okay.
It appears mixed. It seems like it's not. It seems like my triglycerides aren't as low,
Hmm.
but it does seem like they were that the cheese did make a difference,
So
which
cheese
kind of
dropped your triglycerides.
the waking triglycerides relative to what they were before.
And at the 12-hour point where you said it normally is normalized, is that stable? And
Oh, that's still the same. Yeah. Like if there's any one thing I want everyone who's watching this to come away from, it's fast for freaking 12 hours or more. If there's anything I could just pound into everybody, even an hour or 2 hours before, I've got a great scatter plot that shows this. Even fasting 10 hours, which I would have thought would be safe before this point in time, I still would have numbers above 150 in my scatter plot.
so weird.
So above 150, right?
Hmm.
Like be fasted 12 hours if you're on very, very low carb. And if you think there's anything, and granted, with the caveat, this is an N of one.
Mm.
It may not apply to everyone, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think it's a huge coincidence that there's a lot of carnivores who've come around who said that. And then sure enough, we press upon, there's other things that can come up like coffee and a whole bunch of other
Yeah.
things. But this is a new one to where now we're going to be pretty ironclad.
Yeah.
Like you need to have done it at least 12 hours or it's not going to be a very useful metric.
And the labs themselves, don't they say 12 hours plus fasted? Don't they tell you that?
No,
What do they tell
no,
you?
they
How many hours
changed
fasted? Just
it.
from the day before? So you could eat at
No,
11 o'clock at night and then go in at 7 in the morning?
on a cholesterol test now, they will tell you it doesn't have to be fasting.
Oh, wow, that's so profitable. That is
It's
so profitable. Wow. Oh, that's genius. I bet I
it's
remember seeing this recently, but I didn't know that this was the standard of care now, or like the
it's the
standard
standard.
recommendation.
It's the standard. We get it practically daily, where somebody will come with their panel. Their panel will have super high triglycerides, and this
Yeah.
is going to be more common, Tristan, if
Yeah.
you're on a low carb diet. You've literally installed triglycerides into your body
Yeah,
from the food you just
that's your
ate.
fuel source, right? So to anybody who's new
Correct.
to this and you haven't seen the previous streams that I've talked with Dave about cholesterol, about triglycerides, about LDL not being the negative thing that we all are taught that it is inherently, right? There are caveats to this. There is a lot of nuance to this, and the body is a complicated system. There are systems within systems communicating through fat metabolism, right? So
Yeah,
triglycerides, if you just want to maybe give a quick rundown, what are triglycerides, Dave? Wax poetic for
sure.
us.
And of course, I'm going to throw in the caveat. I don't know if LDL is good or bad. I know this, though. I know that a lot of the research we're doing at Cholesterol Code, and a lot of the people who follow my work who've also been able to elucidate more, it's so much more dynamic than we are told. And in that extent, we're really focusing on exactly how much of this is applied to the energy model. That said, as we've talked about before, I myself am certainly much more comfortable with a higher LDL level in the context of being metabolically healthy. And I think there's a lot of evidence that backs that up, as you know, with my low carb cholesterol
Yeah.
challenge and the LDL bounty and so forth. So, triglycerides. If you are eating meat, are you planning to eat meat soon, Tristan? Are you?
I had a half-kilo steak this morning with what looked like a
Was there
half.
visible fat in that steak?
There was a lot of fat, and then I put this thing called butter on top of it.
Ah, all right,
It
all right.
basically looked like it was icing though, because there was so much butter.
So you are literally eating
Oh
triglycerides.
my goodness, Dave.
The, the fat that is in that steak is not much different than the fat that's in your body.
Why is our
It's
body storing toxic triglycerides, Dave? Why is your body storing toxins? It's exhaling toxic CO2 and storing toxic triglycerides? Wow.
it's true. It does make this toxic product known as triglycerides because it seems to be a very handy version of reduced energy to place in and around your body, especially to nearby tissues that can make use of it.
I thought
Now,
glucose was the only safe energy source that we could run on though, Dave.
well, that's I certainly don't run on a lot of glucose myself. I run a lot directly on fatty acids. And one of the catches is that I feel like I pound this drum a lot, but a lot of people, when they hear keto diet and when they learn about how fat is broken down to ketones, you can be forgiven if you've come to the understanding that you're 100% fueled by ketones. And I would say, no, actually, it's a minority of the energy that you're doing on a low carb, high fat diet. The majority of the energy that your cells are using right now are fatty acids brought to them directly.
Mm-hmm.
Like and the main way that they're brought to them, well, let me put it this way. I shouldn't say directly because it can be also indirectly, but
Uh-huh.
the way by which your body is supplied via large-scale traffic is in something known as lipoproteins, lipid-carrying proteins. And they bring them in what is known as the stored form of fat, and that is triglycerides. Triglycerides are tri-3 glycerides, as in three fatty acids esterified to a glycerol backbone. But all you need to remember is that it's this kind of larger molecule that can stay within these boats, these lipoproteins, and it moves around in your body. And it supplies it both to your body fat and also directly to your tissues, like your muscle tissue and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you do a blood test and they find that your triglycerides in your blood are high, that is usually a bad sign.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're persistently high, it usually means that there's a metabolic derangement. Oftentimes
Yeah,
it's
you've got too
coupled.
much energy in your blood, and you might have
Right.
high blood glucose simultaneously, which why would you have such high blood glucose and high triglycerides at the same time? I mean, obviously that should be an issue.
Right. And this is where the nuance is super, super important. Why didn't I panic when I saw that my triglycerides were at 220? Well, I knew I didn't have these other corollaries. I didn't have high levels of insulin. I didn't have high levels of glucose. So what was going on here? Well, this is where I'm going to get at just a tiny bit technical, but it kind of gets it to a broader overview. Um, there's one form of energy in the blood that your body acts on,
Mm-hmm.
and that's glucose, right? It needs to keep it. It needs to keep it within a certain delta.
Yeah.
It'll act on it when it's high. It'll act on it when it's low. It's trying to keep it within a certain range, right? But it doesn't. The body doesn't act on triglycerides like it does on glucose. But the passive level of those things that can utilize triglycerides will act on it, the cells themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when I speak on how the body acts on it, in a sense, what I'm talking about is the endocrine response. It's more about whether the body systemically, kind of top down, needs to do something.
Yeah.
That's why I like fat as a software engineer, because it's more like distributed networking. Instead, it's bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
Your cells are like, oh, I actually could use that. I'll take it, right? And its presence is a little more capable. Well, if you have a lot of room in your body fat for energy, guess what? That's what your adipose tissue, your body fat cells, that's their job. They're awesome at that. They're good at taking in energy and then like staging and pacing it, like they take it in during the bolus when you're eating food, and then they slowly distribute the fatty acids back out, especially to neighboring tissues.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're a fat burning machine, particularly if you're very athletic, you'll find your triglycerides are really low. Like you'll end up having triglycerides definitely under 100 for most people.
Yeah, mine are usually in the 80s, or 78 to like 85.
Right. And so in when you have your insulin really low on top of that, that's keeping that rotation going. Your adipocytes are constantly gaining the triglycerides off of these boats, and they're constantly slowly distributing them out to the nearby tissues. And that's super, super important to keep in mind, because now you can understand what the context would be for which triglycerides would be high persistently well past the 12-hour mark. So what happens if I were to see, a family member of mine who had triglycerides of, say, 200 or 300 or 500? I actually, unfortunately, I have some family members that are really high up there.
Wow. And that's like standard American type diet, or what are they eating?
Yeah. And it's and I impress upon them, I'm like, look, there's no good reason for your body to have energy parked in your bloodstream persistently. And sure enough, in every 100% of the time that I see this, where it's parked persistently, we check their fasting insulin, and their fasting insulin is high. As in, their body believes it's in a persistent fed state.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, unfortunately, it's kind of got a traffic jam of sorts. So I definitely wanted to solve this problem of why it is that there would be people would have high triglycerides in spite of having low insulin if they are metabolically healthy.
What's their LDL and HDL?
Well, particularly for a lot of the carnivores I know, LDL will oftentimes be 150 to 250. Like that's probably good.
Yeah, because I'll see my LDL like in the 300s.
Yeah. But you're probably closer to a lean mass hyperresponder.
Yeah, I'd be interested to try looking at my blood work now for a few weeks, because I've gained like 13 pounds in the last 3 months.
Is it, to ask bluntly, is it muscle or is it fat?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Yeah, it's mostly muscle, but it's probably 50-50.
Okay.
It was resistance training, but I was going for, it's not that easy to gain weight on a low carb diet. So
correct.
Right. So what I did was I figured out a way to just jump my calories up a bunch, and was like, let's gain some weight. Let's get up to 165. And I got up to 165 from like 152, 153. So, 12 pounds, some fat.
Have you been 100% carnivore, or have you had any?
Yeah. Well, all right.
This
is interesting. So I added some honey for about 2 weeks, but then I just couldn't do it anymore. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's all I did. Added honey. Sometimes having cream, it's just my strategy is basically going from 1 meal a day to 2 meals a day, and sometimes 3 meals a day.
Because I'll say this, the most eye-opening thing about going carnivore, or for that matter, it just definitely while I was beef only, is that it's so satiating I can't even describe it. Like I felt like I could easily just be eating 800 calories a day and like comfortable. Like I had to constantly eat past satiety.
Yeah.
Or I would have been losing weight.
Yeah, that's the problem for a lot of people.
yeah, now knowing what I know now, I mean, if I wanted, if like I proactively wanted to lose weight, um, I would 100% go carnivore
Mm,
because from my experience that was unlike anything. Even keto, like keto, my appetite's definitely more reduced than when I'm doing any of these mixed diet experiments, or for that matter, what it was beforehand.
yeah.
Um, but really, like it was so satiating, and I hardly thought about food.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it's
it's
the
weird,
only
right? Because if you've done keto for years, it's like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like because I used to think that I would always be on the blood sugar roller coaster, and then you get on ketogenic diet. It's very stable. Everything feels really good, but it's really weird that pulling out plants would have such a dramatic effect, and the fiberlessness. It's just something about that makes the digestion just almost. It's never perfect. As long as you got poop coming out your butt, it's kind of weird. But like the
yeah.
digestion is just, it's amazing. Like it's hard to describe how great it is not to feel gurgling and have gas, and you don't even
It's
notice
true.
like that you had more of these issues until they're gone.
No, exactly that. Exactly. Like keto helped with GI issues far more than anything else. I already knew I had fructose malabsorption from
Mm.
before, and so I felt like I managed it well. But once I'd gone carnivore, I mean, it really is one of those things where you're like, wow, keto is such a huge difference from my prior diet that I couldn't even imagine that something could be a big difference from keto.
I didn't think it would be different at all, but it's very different.
Which is exactly what I thought. I thought when I went on it, I thought of all the experiments I'd be doing, this would be the biggest nothing burger.
This is
Like
why
I
I
would go,
wanted to talk to you because I love talking to people who've had a similar experience to me and just comparing. Because you've done keto probably longer than I have. I started keto in like 2013. Um,
oh no, you've done it longer. I started April 2015.
okay, yeah. Well, you've done it more carefully, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, there is one super awesome thing about the experiments I'm doing. A lot of times when people change diets, it's under some kind of catalyst.
Mm.
So
It's an
either
emergency sometimes, right?
yeah, either it's an emergency change and they felt they had to do it that way, so it's under like some stress or duress. Or for example, when they leave the diet, it's because it's some family event, some like so there's always something that can kind of over something that can kind of mask our ability to perceive
Mm.
what changed. So there is something special about going, oh, you know what? I'm going to start this experiment on Saturday the 8th, and I'm going to be eating this stuff, et cetera. And so I know at the time that I come up to the point where I flip the switch, oh, wow, I was feeling like this, now I'm feeling like that. And so I keep lots of notes on it.
Mm.
This one's got lots of notes, actually.
Yeah.
I I was mindful, knowing in advance this was going to happen. I was mindful to track even mild discomfort GI periods.
Yeah.
Like if I had any kind of a stomach ache, and it wasn't flawless. It wasn't empty. I want to say there was something like three quote unquote events.
Hmm.
But I also wrote down there a couple of those events kind of had some confounders to them. So, for example,
Mm.
one of them, I ate really a lot of food.
Yeah.
Um,
Like double
and
what you normally would at that time.
yeah, it was, I don't know if it was double, but I want to say it was something like 50% more.
Hmm.
And there's a little bit of a story behind that because I knew the ordering time would take them longer. What One of my biggest frustrations just in general with not only keto but carnivore anything where you have to order special is even if it's something as basic as I just want burger patties.
Yeah.
Just burger patties all by themselves. In your head you're thinking, "Oh, okay, that'll be easy.
Yeah.
They'll they'll have that out to me in 5 minutes." And invariably, I want to say 4 out of 5 times my order will take longer than the people I ordered with.
Yeah.
Uh, Even if they're like behind me in line or something. It's,
That's so
you know,
funny.
it is
Does
what
it
it
ever
is.
make you wonder?
It it does because naturally I want to assume that there's probably just a lot of the burgers that are already like prepared. But the problem
Yeah.
is when you go to a place like Smash Burger, they make it fresh.
Right.
So I sometimes wonder if people are just rolling through orders really quickly, and then they realize, oh crap, this is they only want just patties, and so they have to start over again. Or I don't
I
know.
used to work at In-N-Out Burger. I never saw anybody mess with the food. I wouldn't worry so much.
No, yeah, I don't think it's that necessarily, but no, I have to say that all things considered, I felt better in the GI area. I can't say that a lot of things changed as far as mental acuity or anything along those lines. But I will say the one other thing that really stood out was just the generally not thinking about food, like just not thinking about food. It just didn't,
Yeah.
it, even compared to keto, I wasn't looking ahead to meals as much. Even though, again, that wasn't a huge distraction, but it was noticeably a big
It's a
difference.
weird thing, right? When you go to like mono foods, and I don't know. For me, I never get tired of steaks. So I mean, it's funny thinking about how you did a carnivore diet. It was so precise, right? So you weren't getting. What were you eating on the average day?
While I was doing the beef only,
Yeah, on beef
um,
only.
so I would have not all days, but most days I would have like all beef hot dogs in the morning.
Yeah,
I would usually have a burger at around noon or something in that neighborhood, and then I would have a steak in the evening. But the burger and the steaks were kind of interchangeable as far as timing goes.
yeah.
But I think I want to say I was close to averaging about a steak a day.
Hmm.
Um,
That'd just be so
and
interesting to see if you did the same thing with like two steaks a day, or some the ossobuco where you're having bone marrow or something like that, or maybe a little bit of liver if you were able to stomach that. So
yeah,
I really like shanks because I like the marrow a lot. So my carnivore diet's funny. It'll look like a huge steak with some raw bone marrow and some raw butter on top of the steak after I cook the steak with salt. And then I might have some. I had some sheep kidney yesterday. Oh, Dave, it was amazing. Like, it sounds ridiculous. A sheep kidney. It doesn't sound appetizing. I used to not be a fan of kidney, especially beef kidney. I never really liked it until Jessica started kind of. She figured out how to prepare it really well. But
hmm.
this sheep kidney was so good. It tasted like a little herb bread. Like it tasted herby and bready. I told Jessica it tastes like an everything bagel. Um, Not that I crave everything bagels. I used to eat those as a kid. But yeah, so I'll eat a lot of these other odd cuts and stuff. I would love to see you do that type of carnivore diet, like the way that I do it, just for absolute selfishness sake, to see how you were
Oh,
affected by it and how it.
I would love to. Like my one fear is that when I start trying organ meat, I just have a bad experience and I just don't continue on it. So I'm being mindful of what my virgin experiments are
Yeah,
or virgin experiences are, and that I want to, try liver, hopefully from somebody who rocks at cooking liver.
yeah, that's the thing. It's so hard
And I
to get
want to,
right.
right. And I hear lots of stories. I don't know about, like, what I hear is that liver smells great, but that the texture isn't the best for many people.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I don't know.
What if you at
I
the
don't
end of the year at some point, end of the year, you fly down to Ecuador. We find you a house like close by. Like we got some. I have friends that have an
Stop.
Airbnb.
Stop.
My friends have an
I'm
Airbnb. There's a kitchen.
one of the
I'll
longest conversations I had with my wife toward the end of last year was on how much I travel, and that 2019 needs to be different than 2018. And I I can assure you, if I go, yeah, so honey, I also decided to add a trip to Ecuador for a few weeks. I mean, check it out, and mainly because I just want food prepared for me.
bring your
Look,
wife. Bring your wife. You guys go on a
yeah,
vacation.
sure, but she can't do that. She has work that she has to do there. But look, for what it's worth, I think we could probably work that in sometime when we travel on the south side of
There you go.
the Americas.
20,
So
2020. 2020. Dave Feldman, Primal Edge Health in Ecuador. We'll.
I'll look good on 2019, and I'll be like, all right, so that's good. Let's just alternate years.
There you go. Yeah, I'll see you in 2021, wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, your wife must be a saint. Dave's wife is one
My
of the.
is a saint, a bona fide saint. Whoever was going to be married to me and put up with all these experiments. Look, let me tell you a story on just how wonderful my wife is. Date night. Recently, we were seeing Dear Evan Hansen, I want to say, is what it's called. And I worked out that I was going to have an aisle seat.
Yeah.
And because the scheduled timing for the food makes a difference, and our show starts at 7:30 p.m. I told her I would need to very discreetly consume I kept in a secret pocket my hard-boiled eggs and my cheese and the
Hot
what do I want
dogs?
to say? Bottle caps
Okay.
is my source of dextrose.
Oh,
Which
well,
you'll
we
be
haven't even got into this part yet.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into this part.
Spoiler
But
alert.
but imagine you're my wife and you have to put up with, hey, I just want to have one evening out. We could see a show, and I've been looking forward to seeing the show. And I'm like, yes, honey, that'd be great. I have to privately eat at one point during
Yeah.
the show.
I'm
while
gonna
we're
go to the
surrounded by
bathroom
people.
and eat cheese and hot dogs.
No, I couldn't leave to go to the bathroom without making a fuss. So I just need to I had my coat like already looking like it was kind of like in a blanket mode, and I would just be carefully like eating like
Dave's in
underneath.
Las Vegas. Everyone in the audience thought Dave was like secretly doing coke underneath his shirt or something. These degenerates in Las Vegas are like, "Hey man, you got some?"
No, it worked out because since I was on the aisle seat and I was already kind of hugged up near the edge of it, I could kind of turn a little bit that way. So it's pretty discreet. But
Yeah.
even so, my wife truly is a saint. I'm telling you, she's amazing.
That is so cool. That is so cool to have a wife that puts up with all this. I mean, she's supporting the entire low carb nerd community, and we all thank her. We all thank Mrs. Feldman. She's an awesome lady.
She is, and for what it's worth, it would be different if when she married me, I was this extreme biohacker, right? Imagine that you've married me, you're already like 7 years in, so there's kind of a grandfather clause factor, right? And all of a sudden, your husband's like, I have to obsessively research using my body as a lab for the next
Yeah.
X number of years.
Yeah. So
You
sorry,
know,
honey, we're not going out to eat this month. I have every single meal planned, and it's all hot dogs and cheese.
yeah,
She
it's rough.
he's eating
But
the university undergrad diet. Hot dogs and cheese. Shoot, I wish I was eating hot dogs and cheese only when I was in the university. That would be better than what I was when I was eating in college.
I was eating ramen and Totino's pizza.
Yeah, so it's like protein intake was just never a priority. Healthy fats. It's just like burrito, or Ben and Jerry's,
Man,
Burger
the
King.
things I've learned about protein, especially in the last few months, even, you're just crazy to want to limit it substantially.
Right.
And again, I'm not talking about you need to eat protein shakes, but if you're like proactively limiting your protein a lot,
Right.
uh,
Like 40, 50 grams of protein. I get people coming to me who are eating
hey,
40 grams of protein, and they're like, "Oh, really? You want me to eat 120 grams of protein? That sounds like a lot." It's like, well, you are 200 pounds. You know, you, you do have a significant need for this macronutrient.
yeah, it's kind of a biggie. You want to be sure you get enough in particular, you want to be sure you have the composition of amino acids that you find in yourself, right? Like if whatever that is, make sure you have the sources for which you can acquire them.
Hmm. So what have you
So,
what have you learned about protein? How have your views on protein changed, and why in the last few months?
well, as it happens, I'm going to be doing a speech on it at the Carnivore Con that Amber Hearn's putting on.
That's in
So
Colorado.
yeah, it's in Colorado. It's in a few months, so I can't actually comment on it yet because I'd be giving away my
Exclusive.
presentation.
It's okay.
Um,
I
but
wasn't
I'll
invited.
say,
It's all good. Yeah. No, whatever.
but I'll say this: I do believe now that I can understand more why carnivore works so
Mm.
much is because you're already hitting a lot of the native molecule. I call it the native molecule theory. I'm sure I'm not the first to come up with that. But truly, as you kind of get into really brokering at a cellular level what's happening, um, you're really looking at things that either are the components of what it is that you can be building these carrier proteins and so forth,
Hmm.
or you can look at the cofactors that can help you to mitigate it to some extent. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but the
Yeah.
gist of it is just go ahead and get the native parts and you probably will land better. Now, that's not me directly endorsing and insisting carnivore is the only way to go, but it is one that helps me kind of fill in a gap as to why it is that there may be less micronutrient ranges relative to somebody who's not
Yeah.
eating carnivore. It makes it make a little more sense to me.
So it makes sense to you why people are not seeing nutrient deficiencies when they're not intaking a lot of, on paper, ascorbic acid, and some of these other, well, polyphenols, right? We need the polyphenols. I think, or no, she didn't say polyphenols. Jillian Michaels said it was an issue that we aren't getting the beneficial antioxidants, and that our autophagy signaling will get really messed up. I see it. I see you may have an opinion on Jillian Michaels, her opinions on keto. What do you think about her assertions there on why it's dangerous, bad, emergency state, and our macromolecules need all the macronutrients? That's a quote from Jillian Michaels.
Well, let me first state that, as you know, I'm not a personalizing. I don't like to attack people, and everyone's free to their own opinion. I do, however, feel that there is quite a lot to be said on the front of antioxidant defense. And it's not as simple as you eat more of the antioxidants and therefore you will have a greater antioxidant defense. Part of the reason that I like learning about lipoproteins, especially low density lipoproteins, the so-called bad ones, right, that carry the low density lipoprotein cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, is that as it turns out, they carry a very prominent antioxidant called alpha tocopherol. Alpha tocopherol is it actually neutralizes a reactive oxygen species, particularly free radicals. And it basically, what it does is it combines with the two and turns both into a non-reactive product. So I think I may have mentioned this in a prior show, and it's something that's really been an obsession for me. Since I've been in Las Vegas, and really most of my life, I've had some degree of sickness pacing that I'm used to, some amount of colds and flus, and since being in Las Vegas in particular, I had bronchitis 3 times over 7 years.
Wow.
And I have not, surprisingly, I have not had a cold or a flu, or if I did, it was like one of those things where it was kind of like a sore throat for a moment.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, maybe something's coming on, and then like nothing happened. But I've not had any kind of infectious anything that's put me down.
No, it's
Nothing.
because of all the toxic meat you're eating. Your body is so clogged up that it's not detoxifying anymore. I'm channeling my inner vegan right now.
Do you watch The Simpsons by chance?
Yeah. Well, not recently, but grew up on The Simpsons for sure.
There's a great Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns is taken to like the doctor, and they run a test on him, and he goes, "Oh, so am I okay?" And he goes, "No, it turns out you have every disease," and it like he like mentions that there's all these different diseases. It's like, well, so why isn't it killing me? It's like, well, and he pulls up this like these bunch of stuffed animals in this like limited doorway, and he goes, "See, they can't quite fit in when they're all crunched together." Like he's illustrating that because they're all pushed together, that's why it's not having a bad effect. So I think that might have been where you were going.
Yeah, exactly. It's so toxic from all the animal protein and fat.
Yeah, it's canceling each other. The toxicity is canceling each other.
You just can't manifest. Your immune system doesn't even work. So it's like you have all these diseases and flus and colds. It just doesn't manifest. Right? I've literally heard people say this. There were a few of these pundits promoting like plant-based diets who were saying that that's why Michaela Peterson was able to live now out, without pain and constant, disruption with flare-ups. It was just because she's having immune system. Her immune system's just not working anymore. It's deficiency.
And again, I mean, it's a struggle because I feel like we should all be talking about this really on the table in an open, honest way that can be testable. Because I am, again, I can't emphasize this enough. I'm all for a vegan diet that can be nutritionally complete if it works. I'm all for a carnivore diet.
I'm all for alternate universes too. I love video games and alternate realities.
But the question is, and look, I fully acknowledge the things we're talking about with the carnivore diet as far as nutrition completion. It very well could be that there really is a nutrient deficiency that we would see once there's enough carnivores that are doing this, that we have a reasonable sample size that couldn't have been detected in a short amount of time. right?
Right.
But all of that said, what it is that people, for example, were attacking Michaela Peterson for in this regard, okay, give us something testable,
Right.
right? Give us something that we can then determine. If I think the one thing that's brought up that seems to have some possible merit is, okay, maybe you are killing off or expelling some of the species of your microbiome, right?
Oh, one of the possible negative consequences of a long-term carnivorous diet is that your microbiome might be deficient because you're not giving it sufficient fiber to feed certain microbes, right?
Right. And I'm interested in that. That's I don't. It's not about whether I believe that's true or not, but I feel like that is something that could be worth watching in the long term.
Well, what breaks
Okay,
down
now,
fat and protein? I mean, we need fiber and carbohydrate are broken down by fermentation, but I mean, are there not going to be bacteria that will be digesting protein and fat? I mean, what happens when I eat a piece of liver that's been sitting in a jar for 2 months? Right? I mean, that's something that is
yeah,
sitting, it's literally putrefying right there. It smells amazing like an aged cheese. It increases my hunger and it makes it feel like I can just chug 3 meals when normally I would eat one. So I think there are these things. I wish that could be explored, or somebody would maybe test high meat and see what's in it. But yeah, it doesn't. It seems like people are giving us hypothetical excuses rather than real testable hypotheses on what's going on.
and hey, hypothetical excuses are hypotheses. By the way, I'm looking down at this time because I'm actually testing my blood while we're chatting because
Nice.
it's the 10 o'clock hour.
He's
We
got a hungry gigapet down there, guys.
Yeah, you remember how I was just talking about in the middle of the show I would do something? Well, in the middle of this broadcast, I'm doing something because I got to hit the timelines. But I'll go ahead and actually show you this. This is the capillary tube now full of my blood.
Yep. Yep.
And I have to squeeze it into a special reservoir that's here in the cardio check.
And that's 10 o'clock every morning you do that.
Correct. Uh, well, and in particularly over the course of this specific experiment, because I need to know what the 12-hour times are. So we haven't gotten into it, but I'll go ahead and mention it real quick while I'm waiting for this to wrap, and then I've got to go grab my food. Basically, this addendum experiment, I get through. I'd originally planned to do 30 days carnivore, but technically I can say I did 28.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because I had eaten my baseline diet for 5 days, and now I plan to eat my baseline diet for 4 more days and have done so up to this point, with just one thing changed. The one thing changed is I've added dextrose in the form of these bottle cap candies.
You're eating candy carnivore. Carnivore plus candy.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
You go from a resistance training experiment where you're making yourself sore every single day and you measure your blood glucose. Then you ate white bread and you watch your carotid arteries start to thicken. The CIMT exam thicken everything. And now you eat a carnivore diet and you're experimenting with meal timing in relation to testing your triglycerides and your blood glucose, or your lipid panel rather. And you discover some very interesting things about triglyceride transport and fatty acid transport in the body that you're going to probably expand upon greatly in your analysis of over the next year. And now you're going to eat a carnivore diet and then eat sugar bottle cap candies and test your blood.
Yes. Well, and it gets a little more interesting. The reason I'm doing this one is actually because of a gentleman by the name of Paul Mason, a fantastic doctor from Australia.
Yeah, I love
He
Paul.
did a speech that referenced the Feldman Protocol at Low Carb Down Under in Gold Coast last year.
Okay.
And in it, he hypothesized that the Feldman Protocol would work if you just added more carbs. And I think, and I'm not sure if he specified the carbs, but since I had already done an experiment with fructose, which was the Skittles experiment from last year.
Yeah.
But it's funny, when you list off experiments, I keep going, well, how much time do you have? Last year, I want to say it was in February, so almost a year ago, I did an experiment similar to this in that I ate the same way. It was the baseline diet at that time. I ate the same way every single day, and then the only interventions I made were 2 times in having Skittles, a packet of Skittles before each meal. And then I did a second intervention a little while later, which was a packet of Skittles after each meal.
And and Skittles are high in fructose, or are those high in glucose?
Fructose corn syrup. Yeah.
HFCS. And how much what do you call it, sugar per, or how many grams of carbohydrate per serving was that?
I don't remember. I'd have to
Okay.
look at the chart.
What happened
But
when you did that? What was the result?
well, the cholesterol did not go down. It remained, I think, close to the same throughout.
So sugars,
Uh,
just like white bread, is good for us because cholesterol, right? So for those
it
of you who don't,
didn't lower it. It didn't lower it.
yeah.
So I don't believe I've yet done an experiment up to this point where adding carbs would reduce adding carbs to a ketogenic diet would reduce cholesterol.
Yeah.
Now I've done isocaloric ones where I've swapped out some of the fat and brought in some carbs, and that brings it down, and that gets to the energy status portion of my research.
And can you reiterate, just give a quick summary for those who didn't see the last podcast I did with Dave? What happened when you did your white bread experiment?
Oh yes, well my LDL cholesterol did, as I predicted, go down, and in fact, as I predicted, was the biggest drop ever. It dropped 213 milligrams per deciliter from 296 to down to 82. I want to say.
Wow. Wow. So white bread,
Massive.
on paper, Dave Feldman making white bread look like it's some health savior, right? So he's doing a
Yeah.
ketogenic diet. And what about your inflammation markers, your CRP and stuff? Do those stay the same?
No, I think I'll have to double check on the CRP, but the thing that I care about the most, as I mentioned before, triglycerides and HDL. Triglycerides shot way up. I think that was the one time it was like 240, and this was 12 hours fasted.
Wow.
So 240 at 12 hours fasted is something that would raise alarms for me with a family member, and my HDL had dropped into, I want to say like the 30s or 40s, something like that. Definitely a no bueno, like don't do this kind of thing. But hey, my LDL had dropped to 82.
And that's what's so alarming to me, man. That's what's so crazy. It's like, I mean, that stat alone, you would have a doctor telling you, yeah, you got to do that. That's great. That's healthy, right? I mean, just on paper, it looks healthy to modern medical orthodoxy, and I think it's pretty alarming what he's showing here.
It's definitely scary to me. Now, I need you to talk to the audience for a few minutes while I go and grab my food. Because again, this is going to be the mukbang, as we were sort of talking about before.
This is the mukbang, guys. So this turned into a Dave Feldman mukbang. So he's going to talk about his new experiment. Go ahead, Dave. Dave will be back in a minute. I'll pull Skype off. So Dave's taking a quick break. Dave is actually excited to show you guys what it is he's been eating on his recent experiment. So I think the white bread thing is pretty weird. Right? How alarming is that? That the white bread drops his LDL cholesterol. Right? But all the while he's getting worse readings on his carotid artery exam, his CIMT, and his triglycerides went up dramatically at the 12-hour mark fasted. How crazy is that? So I should get some food too. What's up, Ari? How was it? Where's Ryder? Sleeping? Ari looks upset. So, now let's see what's going on in the chat here. What's up, everybody? What's up? Check out Robert Morse. we got a coordinated vegan mukbang going on in the chat still. We've had like 10 of these trolls show up and just start peppering the chat with their nonsense. Look, guys, the future ex-vegans in the chat, you got to understand, you guys will soon realize just how lost you've been on this little journey of yours, right? You're not saving the world. You're not making ethically beneficial, conscious decisions. You're destroying your health, and your parents are worried about you. Legitimately. The people that are telling you in your life, all these people in your life that are telling you, please stop doing what you're doing. You look like shit. You're mentally unstable right now, and we want our daughter or our son back. All these people telling you that are right. Your mom's worried about you, dude. Your dad's worried about you, chick. Quit playing games and trolling my chat with vegan shit. All right. I have a vegetarian friend who lost his aviation medical for the last 3 months and can't fly. The guy's so malnourished, yeah. But it can't be the diet, right? Selfwave says, Robert Morris nearly killed me. Maniac diet. And someone says, nice beard. Someone's commenting on my beard. You know what? I don't know if you're being facetious, so I won't ban you for saying nice beard. But you're on a thin ice, Limitless channel. All right, Dave's back. Let me pull up Skype again here. And there it is, guys. 4 hot dogs and 4 ounces of Colby Jack cheese.
Yeah, now, it's not that I'm a huge hot dog fanatic. It's that the reason this is my baseline diet is I need something that was portable. So let's say I have conferences I'm going to, I travel a lot, for example. How can I ensure that if I'm on an experiment, I can keep maintaining the same things that I'm mean to eat? Well, problem is I can't do a steak or a burger because the consistency of steaks and burgers are already different. And I can't count on having the means to cook them if I'm going from one place to the next. So
yeah. Well, also, when I look at a ribeye steak next to a ribeye steak, one of them might have 15, 20 more grams of fat than the other one from the same animal.
Mm-hmm. It's very weird to be eating on camera.
It's really cool to watch you think about how weird it is eating on camera while you eat.
Well,
just talk, man. There's no, and I think official mukbang etiquette. You don't have to like cover your mouth or anything. You just let it fly.
yeah, that's not going to happen.
Dave's such a gentleman.
So, have you ever eaten steak on camera?
Yeah, I can have some steak right now. Here, hold on. You wanna talk to the audience for 2 seconds? I'll go grab something to eat.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, I'll be right back.
So, I do get this question all the time. Does my baseline diet get tiring? It absolutely does. I want to say, whenever you decide that you're going to become a citizen scientist for yourself, there really is something to be said for consistency, because the data is just going to matter that much. So I definitely encourage everybody, if you're ever thinking about doing something like this, to figure out what it is you do feel you could eat every single day that can become your baseline diet that you can then test an intervention against, so that you're either adding something or subtracting something that's associated with it. And in that regard, like I said, yeah, the hot dogs and the Colby Jack cheese worked, and they were something that I felt like I could truck through.
Right.
And I did. So at least I was able to pull that off. Oh.
Okay, hold
Now
on.
you're going to eat it
Gotta get
raw?
I can't hear. Okay. So I'm back,
Now you're going
guys.
to eat that raw? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm gonna eat some of it. I'm not gonna eat all of it raw. That's just the chunk that I grab. So it's an ossobuco. There's actually a lot of fat on this one. If you look closely, it's actually really beautiful. This has some of the most deep yellow fat. Let's see if I can. There's the camera. The fat is just so deep yellow on this. It's funny. Different animals will have a very different. And then here's some high liver. That's from December 16th.
It's like a fine wine. You're like, oh, December 16th. Yeah, good year.
It really is, man. No, it's better than cooking it. Look, I like liver cooked. Liver cooked is pretty good, but fermented liver is just something so different. It's down in the bottom there. So it's just sliced up into little pieces and put in a jar, and I let it sit for a while. But Dave, this is how I actually was able to gain 13 pounds in about 3 months. And of course, it's not all muscle. Some of that is fat. For a week, I had yogurt and honey for a week, some raw yogurt with some good honey. So increase my my calories and increase my insulin levels a little bit.
Yeah, and look, you want to gain weight, you want to get that anabolic hormone going, right?
Yep.
To what extent that you can. And that's the irony, is so much just comes down to, wow.
It smells like, let's do a smell test. Oh man, it smells like a Merlot or something. Like it smells fruity, almost like grapes. It's just got an incredible smell. This one is very spritzy. It's kind of got this like tangy sourness, and in the back of your mouth, you get those deep, rolling, chocolatey, fatty, bitter flavors. It's indescribable. It's so good. The way I was able to gain 13 pounds, this is a huge appetite increasing, or has a major appetite increasing and digestive tonic effect. And it makes it easy to eat an extra meal if I have a few bites of the liver, the high liver.
I'm curious, is that commonly consumed anywhere there in Ecuador?
No, it's not. It's not. This is, I mean, I don't, it seems like it's a more recent thing that people have actually done this in jars, right? When you read Stephenson's book, have you read Stephenson's Fat of the Land?
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's a great book. You might want to read that. I mean, it's just as part of like the low carb folklore history. He talks about high meat and how a lot of the European upper class would treat high meat like cheese or wine as well. They would have, they would intentionally rot it. He didn't actually talk about how they would do it. Maybe I'm not sure what type of vessels they would use. But people have been doing high meat for a while. I mean, the Inuit do it intentionally.
I didn't know that. So the Inuits, that's like a commonplace for the Inuit?
There's a documentary from the BBC. They did a series. It was called like Human Planet, and they follow some Inuit families in one of the sections, and they show how they'll take these. I think it was a bird. It was either a bird or a fish, and they would make a little sack of rawhide, and they would take the entire bird or the entire fish. I forget which one it was. If it was a bird or a fish. They might do both. It might depend on geography, and different tribes might do it differently. But they would put it in this bag, bury it underground for a year, and then come back, and they open it up, and they just, ooh, and they sit around, yeah, and they smell it, ooh, and then take a little bite. So it's like
Now, wouldn't that have been more preserved? Like, aren't they typically in colder climate? So they would be.
Yeah, so it would be a very slow fermentation, right? So I do this in the fridge. This is fermented in a refrigerator, so it's a very slow, kind of controlled fermentation. It tastes it tastes like the lacto fermentation thing, like it's because there is more carbohydrate content in liver. So I think that a lot of the enzymes and stuff. When you look at what the liver does, it's not. People think it's a filter, right? Like it's something like, oh, the blood goes in and you filter the toxins out and store it in the liver, like your car air filter. It doesn't work like that. It's producing enzymes, and it's very complicated, and it's not just there are, when you look at the liver, there's these veins that go into it where the blood flows, but the liver is like pumping enzymes and putting things into the blood. It's not there to filter the blood. It's there pumping out compounds, at least how I understand it. It's a very dynamic and an amazing organ. So who knows what's going on nutritionally in there beyond just the vitamin A, the copper, all these things that people talk about. It seems like there could be some really incredible enzymatic things happening in there.
Now I'm curious, do you butcher a lot of your own meat?
No, we had like 12 cows up at our property, but we got rid of them. We want to just get 2 milk cows. Oh, we don't live up there yet. Where we live, we don't have room for cows right now. In the house that we rent.
Oh, so it's just more a space thing?
Yeah, space, and then, basically space. I think what I might do is I might buy some meat cows and rent some, because you can, rent pasture. You buy them when they're young. You rent pasture, and you fatten them up, and then you slaughter them. We'll probably start doing that. I just haven't had time to do anything like that. I have a friend, he slaughters cows once a week, so there's just a little bit of, it's just meat from, I like my meat really raw. I really enjoy it like seared, so I'll do it very rare. And sometimes I'll just eat it raw. So I'm just like, cutting off little bits of the of this ossobuco steak. And,
I know so many people that do that, but it was a huge jump for me to go from medium well to medium, just to having my steak cut. I do intend to eventually move towards rare, just in how I get my meat cut, but I have yet to even have eaten something raw yet. Beyond the typical things like fish or something like that, I haven't had any beef raw.
I used to love sushi, and that's kind of what made it easy for me, I guess. To, you look at beef, and it doesn't. We haven't been told. We've been told that you don't eat it raw, right? But when you look at things like carpaccio, tartare, uh, or even just a rare steak. A rare steak is just the outside of this is seared. The inside's still relatively raw on a very rare steak. So I don't know. I think it takes time to even become interested in trying it like that. Just from making so many steaks, I found myself, I would cut a little bite of steak every once in a while. And then I started eating more and more of it raw. Sometimes I'll do a whole meal of it raw. I like it seared. Seared is really nice. But that's cool. Like raw, it's muscle meat. So there's no blood in it. It's just, there's myoglobin in there in between these little, it's an incredible thing when you look at what it is. It's
Right.
just, I don't know, I'm always amazed with steak and muscle tissue.
Now I'm curious, how have you been, like, you've kind of been doing a natural experiment by introducing honey.
Mm-hmm.
How have you felt overall?
I felt fine with the honey for about 2 weeks, but then I just naturally stopped wanting it, right? So it was like I got to the point where I was like, okay, maybe I'll start feeling some insulin resistance issues from the sheer volume of food and from the added glucose. So I only lasted a couple weeks. It might have been 2.5 weeks on more honey.
So you stopped
Yeah.
having honey altogether?
Yeah, well, I was adding it because I wanted to gain some weight. I filled my glycogen stores up, and I think I hit a point where I had a couple days where my energy was lower, and then I just pulled out the honey and I got back into my normal phase. So then what I did was I just started adding a meal a day, right? So I would usually do 1 or 2 meals. When I can fit a third meal in, I get a third meal in. So I'll try to eat a meal in the morning. Midday, I can usually get in a meal while I'm doing work, right? So I could eat like I'm doing now at a computer. And then at the end of the day, I hopefully can be hungry again for another meal. But I really find that the high liver, for some reason, it's a really important digestive tonic, or not important, but it's a really powerful one for being able to increase my appetite. So it allowed me to basically eat like 30% more calories every day. And of course, I also add butter, right? Because it's hard, just eating animal foods, it's hard to gain weight. You're so satiated. So it's like it came down to adding a lot more fat and getting in a whole nother meal per day. So 30% calorie increase, significant amount of fat. It's still probably like 2 pounds of meat a day, maybe.
How many calories roughly do you think you're consuming?
Oh, man, I wish I could answer that. I've been thinking about measuring it.
You said about 2 pounds of meat.
All right, so
you
about
think?
2 pounds of meat with the fat that comes in those steaks, right? So maybe a couple pounds of steak. Some of that is bone. There'll usually be a bone in ribeye. So that bone can weigh 100 grams, right? Sometimes the bone
Right.
can weigh more than that. And then butter, I mean, maybe 100. I'm saying probably about 250 to 300 grams of fat and 160 grams of protein.
Oh yeah, so that's pretty decent.
Yeah.
Maybe 3,000-ish
And I'm not
calories.
huge. I mean, that's like, I was, 150.
How tall are you?
5'8". So 150 pounds was like the lightest I'd been, and I felt kind of good at that leanness, but I started lifting weights again because I don't know, it's fun. I didn't want to lift for a while, and then I wanted to lift, so it kind of coincided with that. So yeah, I was able to gain about 13 pounds in 3 months that way. Not all muscle, but some muscle. Some of it was rebuilding muscle that I had before when I was lifting a lot with higher frequency and doing a lot of deadlifting and squatting and stuff.
Now you get a decent amount of free exercise anyway, right? Aren't you outdoors a lot? And
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I don't know. Sometimes there's weeks where I'm doing a lot of work and I don't get outside that much, but for like 20 minutes of intentional movement, maybe a couple times a day. And then I have other days where I walk around a lot. I mean, it's steep here, so there's a lot of movement every day, just getting up and in and out of your house. It's high altitude as well.
so when you do work out, you go to a gym or you have something there?
No, I go out in my backyard. I have a rack, like I can bench here, I could squat and deadlift, and I have some kettlebells and medicine balls and resistance bands, and it's like a home gym setup.
Do you have the missus spot you at all?
Yeah, she spotted me on bench press yesterday. I used a slingshot yesterday for the first time in like 2 years. Never used
So I told you I got to do like some straight up working out. I want to say just before the carnivore diet. I am impressed at how not strong I am. I I really want to have a nice, strong stretch of just being able to do this and not having experiments.
Yeah.
I just have to quit thinking of experiments and finding stuff.
Are you
That's
addicted to the experiment? Is this like, is it a high that you get from this that's like
for
almost
sure.
incomparable to other things?
Hmm.
Mm.
Well, part of it is because it keeps solving problems.
Yeah. And it opens up
Like,
new problems and new questions every time.
it does. So look, there's there's a version of me I will always have branded in my brain. And it was the version of me that was in November of 2015. I get my blood work and I flip out. And I remember how depressing that was. It's depressing to be just faced with huge questions of fear, of mortality. And I've held on to that, I think, and probably will for the rest of my life, as one of those moments that's a real driving force for me now. Is I want anybody who goes on a ketogenic diet who then sees that their cholesterol went up to have not perfect answers, but answers,
Yeah.
somewhere to start and somewhere to start. And so in that sense, I mean, it's the same thing with this triglyceride carryover is what I call it, triglyceride carryover effect. This was a big question. Why is this happening? This doesn't make sense given what we know about the energy metabolism and so forth. Why would there be people with high triglycerides? And getting to the point where we could kind of understand this time scale problem and being to where I can actually now have confirmed over like half a dozen tests that always seems to fall off once everything's controlled at the 12-hour mark, given no other confounders. That was huge. That was hugely satisfying for me, even though my fingers hurt like a mother effer, right? Like and it's not even just that. Like the physical sacrifice is one thing. I do kind of put my family and my wife through a lot, which again is God bless them. I went to visit my family. I only go to visit my family during the Christmas holidays every other year for this span of time. So they really look forward to that time, right? Mm-hmm. And here I am going, guys, this is kind of a big deal. I need to follow up on this. And it's not like I can pause an experiment and then pop back into it. It could be that context would get lost.
That's what I was thinking earlier when I was in the shower thinking about this. It's like, look, if I'm doing something, I'm going to make one little change. That little change is only relevant to all the other contextual things that I'm controlling for in the self-experiment that I'm doing right then. So Dave Feldman, how do you know that your baseline washout diet now is the same as your baseline washout diet 3 months ago as far as results go? Do you do a washout period and measure just to make sure that that's still the same every time?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, this is something I'm very vocal about. If you're going to have a washout period, you can't just have a washout period and then do your experiment and then have a blood draw. Ideally, you can do your washout, then get a blood draw, then do the experiment, then get a second blood draw, right? Like that's the bare minimum of what I would really like for myself. And that's usually so take, for example, how I had to be on beef only, not for 14 days, but for 16 days. When I was looking forward to eating eggs that same morning. But once I got stuck 7 times and it didn't go anywhere, I was like, well, the beef only has to go for 2 more days. I have to bookend it exactly at that point. And that's exactly what I did, because that's just what it takes. But getting back to, my family, that was over New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Oh, man.
I couldn't stay up for New Year's Eve, which is also another one of the traditions that I had to break. Because I was like, unfortunately, I need my sleep schedule to be identical for each of these days in case it is a confounder. Wow. Which, even though I say in case, I know it's at least a little bit of a confounder because you can upset your circadian rhythm, you can, play with your cortisol levels and so forth.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize this. And I don't say this so much to, drum up sympathy or anything along those lines. I say this because I do want more people to be doing what I'm doing. I want more people to actually be proactively obsessively testing and be mindful that, yes, there are some sacrifices you've got to make, but I do think there really is a greater good. There's a big pay it forward that you get to do with this. And I encourage that, obviously. I think there's just so much you can learn in such a short amount of time with really well executed N-of-1 experiments.
Mm-hmm. So why and when did you decide on the experiment that you're doing now? And you're showing us the experiment. I used to eat those are the like, what are the brown ones flavored as? Are those root beer flavored?
Those are root beer, I think.
Yeah, I remember those. I know exactly what those taste like.
So I'm not sure if they'll be able to see this, but
Dextrose, yeah, dextrose, maltodextrin, and then a bunch of lovely preservatives and colorings.
bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of awful, awful crap.
And it's not even vegan because it may contain egg.
Right. So, yeah. Paul Mason gave a speech last year, said that actually the Feldman protocol would work if you just add more sugar. So this is that experiment, and it worked nicely as it could dovetail at the end of my carnivore experiment.
Yeah.
Now,
End of the carnivore experiment, and you're adding in dextrose. How much dextrose per day are you eating?
75 grams per meal, so a total day of 225.
And you couldn't just get a tablespoon of honey and do it that way, could you?
No, God, a tablespoon of honey I would kill for that.
Right? Honey's nice,
right.
man. It's like a digestive aid, too.
But the one thing that's different this time around is I've got a continuous glucose monitor on, which I didn't have for last year's experiment. And for me, Dave the human, I think that's been a net detriment, because then I get to look at stuff like this.
Yeah. All day.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say what those peaks are at, because that's actually part of the fun of the poll that I had. But they don't make me happy. I don't like looking at them. I'll put it that way. They're very unenjoyable to look at.
And you weren't wearing a continuous glucose monitor during the carnivore experiment?
No, I was.
Okay, and what did you see there?
This flat line. You know what? I'm going to actually pull it up real quick.
So 4 hot dogs and 4 ounces of Colby but Jack cheese is not spiking your blood glucose at all.
Not. You can't even tell when I had my meal. Like, I could put that line in front of you and you wouldn't even know when it was that it happened.
That's weird, because me, after a big meal, I'll go up to like 115, 120.
Do you have any carbs of any kind? Anything that's raising your insulin?
No, but I also haven't measured my blood glucose in like 3 months. So I don't know what's happening right now when I'm having this meal. That would have been interesting.
Yeah. I love CGM, by the way. It's just really game changing.
I just don't like paying $1 for every one of those strips. The CGM seems so much better for actually viewing what's going on as well. I mean, you're just getting snapshots, and I've had times where I'll measure my blood glucose and then it'll be 5-10 points different if I measure immediately after on the same finger.
And that has more to do with the device itself.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem for it. So this one actually has a break in it where it lost its signal, but this was the last one that I'd had.
Wow.
On carnivore.
All right, now can you show us the other one again when you're eating sugar? With the
Yeah, I have several of them.
Because now we all know from Benjamin Bickman, Dr. Bickman, I got to have him on soon. He's done some really interesting stuff on the insulin to glucagon ratio. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Dude. And how many grams? 75 grams of dextrose? That's what that is?
75 grams, each one of them. Yep.
At least it's going down at the, same rate every time. Or how long does it stay up there like
that? Basically, it doesn't return to baseline, I want to say, for maybe about 3 hours.
So carbohydrate with protein seems to have a very, very different effect than fat with protein, hormonally and energetically in the blood. Well,
I got to be fair here. I am having a fatty meal and then adding the dextrose.
Mm-hmm.
I already know from doing the white bread and processed meat experiment, that's with low fat. So I stand by what I originally have contended this whole time. If you're going to not be low carb, high fat, I would assume you'd probably be better off being low fat, high carb than to be mixed, unless you can really control your caloric intake.
So you're
So I think,
thinking a mixed diet, like right, high, not high carb and high fat, but moderate diet, or a balanced diet. That's the key word, right? When you talk about
yeah,
carnivore, that's not balanced. It's not sustainable. So you're saying that a balanced diet might not be a great idea. Jillian Michaels says that a balanced diet is necessary.
look, and again, I'll restate that one thing. I think if you can calorically restrict, that's great. You may be able to pull off a quote unquote balanced diet, right? I think, let me put it this way. I do think that virtually all versions of whole food are more likely to work than versions of, processed food, refined carbohydrate induced, etc. That said, I'll bet you yourself would agree, because I have lots of friends. I'll bet you have lots of friends, family members who have tried a zillion diets and landed on keto,
Yeah.
and now they're just on keto.
Yeah, it's
And
not like
it's
keto is just one of the many diets they're going to try. It's usually, I've done all this stuff and I didn't like any of it. And then I heard of this weird
yeah.
thing called keto, and now I don't think about any of that other stuff.
My sister did South Beach. She did calorie restriction. I have cousins that have done Weight Watchers, that have done lots of different huge variations. And the problem is that there's a component of willpower that seems more necessary, particularly with calorie restriction, that if you don't have, there's a challenge to it, right? And that's part of the problem. I think I'm seeing you say stuff, but not hearing you at all.
I was telling my wife to bring the butter up here because we just got a big sack of
Oh,
butter from some friends of ours. I want to show everybody the butter. If she, I don't know if she has it. I don't think she does.
gotcha.
I was trying to be discreet.
Just making sure you weren't chatting at me for something.
No. I was listening to you, but also like, there we go. I'm multitasking. Sorry, Dave.
No worries.
So
So,
why sugar? Why would Mason say that the Feldman protocol will work more if you add a little bit of dextrose to the protocol?
because it brings up the insulin, it also would theoretically result in more LDL receptor production in the liver, thereby increasing clearance. So, end of the story, greater clearance is basically what it comes down to. But for what it's worth, I'll be doing probably another broadcast with Paul in like the next, hopefully, day or so. I haven't actually coordinated it with him yet.
Yeah.
But toward the end of the experiment, where I hope to reveal the data back to him
Yeah, I want
to
to
see
hear
what it
his
looks like.
thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Now, he's not saying that it's a good idea because it would be healthier, obviously. He's saying
Yeah.
to get a certain result in moving around these results on the blood lipid test, this is what might be able to you might be able to test.
Right. And he theorizes that the Feldman protocol is basically just a proxy of that, that really what's happening is that you're just upping insulin relative to what it was before, which would make sense if that's what it is.
So just the increase in consumption of all food, raising overall insulin levels, could have been why it was happening.
And this too, I'm kind of oversimplifying a little bit. It's not just insulin, but
Right.
ultimately greater clearance occurs.
Yeah, so you guys, if you don't already know, I'm sure you do, Dave, he's an engineer. So he's looking at this as an engineer, not, I mean, it seems like modern medical science seems to just chop things up into this biomarker, if read this way, equals this, right? Whereas Dave is looking at this. Oh, I thought we didn't get a big sack?
No, there's multiple different ones.
Oh, okay, we just divided it up already. Okay. With some butter.
Ah,
When we get it, sometimes when we get it in this, they've got it in just a big sack, but it seems they already divided this one up into 1 kilo setups.
I am jealous of how much you probably get food out there that's so locally sourced and so lacking of a bunch of crap we put into our food.
That's why it's so nice. Is we network with other people who are like-minded. We talk about. We get to network with people who are into the same things we are. We learn a lot of stuff. I mean, so the animal that this steak came from, that this ossobuco came from, which has, I mean, this thing has, oh, my camera's behind again. I keep having to restart the Skype video. So it's got this really deep yellow fat, and the bone marrow, which I already ate, you can see a little bit is remaining in there. It was this deep orange color.
Hmm.
Apparently, different breeds of cow will yield different colors of fat. And if you have a castrated male, like a castrated bull, will get much more fat than a bull that has its testicles. So, yeah, so the lack of testosterone and the increase in female hormones in a castrated bull results in a much fattier animal that has just marbling like crazy.
I did not know that.
Weird, right?
So you just castrate your bull and it gets a bit more feminine
Hmm.
and fatty.
Yeah,
Very-
I'm gonna patent a new weight loss diet for humans, but yeah, I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's it'd be called the eunuch diet.
Mm.
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It only works on men.
The opposite.
It
I don't
only
think
works
anybody
on
would
men.
try that. I don't think anybody. At least I don't run into people who are like, I need to be fattier.
Well, it's like
Except me last year with
if
the
you're
weight gains.
underweight, and you're trying to make some gains, consider it.
Fair enough.
Maybe my marketing is not. I don't know. I got to talk to a PR person, I guess. We'll be able to market that one. But so yeah, so the sugar. So how do you feel with the dextrose? I mean, other than the feeling of looking at your blood glucose numbers and seeing this roller coaster suddenly, how does your body feel when you're running on that much glucose at the same time?
So if you had asked me a day ago, I would say it's been mostly not different. There has been one problem, um, which I should save for the Paul Mason broadcast, but I'll just say that there's something that switched right away that was very unpleasant.
Hmm.
But I will say this: there are two things.
I could take a wild
that's-
guess what that was, but I'm not going to.
I'll give you one guess, and if you're right, then I'll confirm it.
Oh, it was digestion.
Mm,
No,
wasn't digestive.
no stomach
Yeah.
discomfort from the glucose. Okay,
Nope.
all right then.
That's been just fine. In fact, I think if you're gonna try to find a way to bring more carbs into your diet and not mess with the GI tract, hey, how about fiberless carbs?
Right, that's why honey is
Right.
honey is a really nice one, and honey is very soothing, and it's got live enzymes in it.
No, my productivity has really dropped off in the evenings. Kind of frustratingly so, because I know my own slate of work capacity, and I know about like I do have a fall off point,
Hmm.
but I'm used to about when that happens, and it now seems about 2.5 to 3 hours earlier.
Interesting.
Um, I am napping a little bit. I'm
Mm,
trying to not nap so much because that
yeah,
becomes its own confounder, but I can't hardly help it
and
following.
that just started with the dextrose, the napping desire.
I'm gonna say that I have napped before, like during the holidays, but it's been like very, very infrequently, and it's been more, you know, being exhausted from family connecting and that kind of stuff. Um, this time around, it's been just there's been a sort of heightened sense of stress that it's hard for me to disentangle from actual stress. So I'll put it this way: I don't think that it's an acute and clearly induced level of stress from dextrose, but it might be a mild amount.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's something else that's
Hmm.
really become apparent this morning. Another small adjustment, not a big one, but a slightly greater clumsiness. Like there's some things I've sort of tripped up on or slipped with my hands with. At first, I thought it was just, a bad day that I was having on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But I've had like one or more incidents each day, very minor things. But the one this morning like really caught me off guard because I was getting up from my bed. I have a routine of things that I always do for all testing,
Yeah.
to where I'm almost like a robot in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? And I did something I never do. There's this little spot where I kind of step onto the bathroom floor from the carpet or something like that, and I kind of tripped up on it. Where I was like, that makes no sense at all. Like what just happened it just never
So
happens. Never
maybe
happens.
a slight cognitive deficit that's just on the.
And seemingly motor refunction, like it's all of my slip ups have just seemed to be like hand-eye coordination, something like that, not cognitive impairing, like, I
Mm.
am not paying attention or
Right,
something
right,
like that.
right.
It just seemed to be like yesterday I was like trying to grab my phone, and it was another one of those cases where like when I do my moments where I've got to like eat a certain way and all that stuff, I
Yeah,
tend to do it in a very routine fashion.
right.
So it's especially noticeable in these cases when I'm doing it this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
It's
definitely does.
it's
I
less
know what you're
loose.
saying. No, because me, I notice like my cognitive function. All right, I notice. How do I explain this? Like my level of coordination and balance and connection with my body and movement patterns are highly correlated with inflammatory responses in the body and dietary change, right? So
Right.
it's like if I'm doing something, what is this?
The sheep crackling.
Sheep cracklings. Okay, Ari wants to show sheep cracklings. So that's from sheep tallow. So we had Nasuit from sheep and cut it up and melted it down to extract the tallow to cook with, and then these are the cracklings left, and she really likes these.
I don't know if they can see you, but I can't see you. I just see the icon.
Oh, here, I got video off on Skype. Sorry, Dave. Ari, will you take the butter with you?
No worries.
And then will you come back up and get my plates and bring them to Mama? So yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying because there's certain things like go kick a soccer ball around or something like that. I can tell how well my immune system's functioning. I can gauge that like a barometer with my level of coordination, the swiftness of my movements, and my comfortability and my proprioception, like my perception of my body's movement through space.
Right.
So when I was eating more carbohydrate and eating more honey, there came a point where it felt like maybe that was starting to slip. Also, I was getting a little bit more tired midday, so I just pulled out the carbs. Right, so that's when I know I hit my limit, when I'm starting to become more insulin resistant, I guess. At which point I said, okay, I don't want to get too fat here. Let's back off, and so I can still get in some workouts while maintaining a calorie surplus. Also, what I always have to make sure is I'm not messing up with my digestion. Right, so if I overeat any foods, any macros, it seems to get to a point where I'll gain a few pounds, and then my digestion will get off, and I'll end up losing the same weight and going right back to the same weight. So that's what I've found interesting about doing this on a more
But you've been able
carnivorous
to
diet.
keep it on,
Yeah, no, I've
right?
had no problem keeping it on. Whereas like the last time I got to
How long
165,
ago was it that you stopped having honey?
2.5 months ago. But I didn't the gain. I made more gains after the honey by having more high liver and then throwing in a whole extra meal of 30%. 30% of my calories.
Gotcha.
And so yeah, it's a lot of food sometimes for me because I'm used to eating not very much, but it definitely it's been interesting with no digestive or GI discomfort, right? If I was trying to eat a bunch of fiber and gain weight, I would reach a point where I would just lose all that weight and go right back to where I was because my gut would just say I can't do this anymore. So I think it was an interesting little experiment.
So this does make me wonder, because in a lot of ways you're doing a lot of self-experimenting of sorts in this fashion.
Mm.
How do you fit in the amount of time you do to churn out as much content as you have? Because you really do put out a lot of videos.
Yeah, so sometimes I'll do a week of a lot of content, and then I'll literally spend a week saying I can't look at a computer. So that does happen. Like I get burned out quite a bit, man. I mean, I find I like streaming. I like doing the streams because I don't have to edit them.
Right. I'm the same way.
So that's it does take time to prepare for a stream to get my thoughts in line and get a topic dialed in. I prefer this format to making like old school videos where I used to just like go outside, grab the camera, 10 minutes on something that interests me at the moment, talking to an audience from the viewpoint of like an anecdote that I had from a client or something like that. But I don't do that as much anymore, and I spend most of my time doing streams, talking to people, and of course we do our keto and carnivore collective every month where we do kind of a group coaching setup. So yeah, it's a lot of time, but I get to do it at home, so it's not, right after this I could throw these off and go wrestle with my kids. So I kind of stay somewhat sane in that way. And also I don't measure everything, right? So it's like I'm doing things intuitively where you're doing it scientifically. I'm doing this intuitively. It's also scientific, but it's not in the way you're doing it, where you're adding this many grams of protein. For me, it's just like, oh, I'm going to add one meal, right? That's how I do my adjustments. Now, if I were to work with a client and they've been tracking their macros diligently, then it's for them, it's okay, we're going to increase your protein by 20 grams, decrease your fat by 30 grams, and see what happens with your hunger. We'll see if you lose body fat, whatever the adjustment is. I do the adjustments a little differently depending on the person. There's other people where they're like, I know I've been eating 1 pound of meat every day with this much added fat. Well, it's like, in that case, why would I give them, okay, remove 10 grams of protein? No, it's just say, okay, well, let's remove 1 ounce of added butter from your diet each day, or let's add 30 grams of fat by doing 2 more tablespoons. So, it depends on the person. I'm more intuitive, and I like to get habits that are dialed in, but I'm not always measuring my food, right? It's more like, okay, the steak looks about like that. That's my breakfast. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like.
You don't have a challenge event of sorts. Like, what I like to call it is, if you're I don't intend to ever have clients or anything along those lines, but when I'm troubleshooting with my own family or friends, if there's somebody who's like, I'm in trouble, and I'm like, okay, what do you eat? And I can already tell that they have poor self-awareness of what they eat. Like, they go, oh, I'm pretty much keto. That's like already a huge red flag.
Yeah,
like,
pretty much.
Oh, you're pretty much keto.
Dave's pretty much keto with his 75 grams of glucose every meal.
Exactly. And so it's people who are struggling with their health. I'm going to sound like an engineer here. I'm going to sound like an obsessive nutritionist here. But truth is, we look at inputs first as engineers. We look at inputs. What's the input into the machine, right?
What I say is, what do you do from the time you wake up, from the time you go to sleep? Everything that you do, all the movement, all the work, like when are you moving?
All relevant.
When are you outside? What time you going to bed? All these things.
But you have to be aware of what is coming into your mouth, because that's the not just the fuel, but it's also the parts of the machinery that are going to help you process and stay alive. Well, okay. If you're in a bad way and you need to make dietary changes and you're succeeding at that, then you don't talk to me. It's okay. You already heard about the keto diet and it's working for you and there's not a problem. Now, what if you come to me and you're like, I've been doing keto, it's not working, and then we do your blood work and you have like 12 milli-IU of insulin in a fasted blood test.
Right, that's crazy.
I'm going to go, yeah, I'm not sure you really are succeeding at being in keto.
Yeah.
And then it can often get defensive from there. But I'm like, look, this is where I do want you to start measuring. You didn't need to measure before. But right now you feel as if you're doing everything you can, but you're really not until we can actually get to the point of measuring. And that's also part of why I like CGMs. I think moving forward, I'm just going to get more ornery about people who need help to strongly consider getting a continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Because you cannot beat that thing for information. I mean, it is so amazing.
Yeah.
And if you think this meal's keto, if you think this cheat meal is not that bad, all that stuff gets answered pretty well.
Right.
By what you see as the results.
Well, some people might freak out too. Do you notice that there are people who, when they start monitoring, they start measuring things, they get manic about it, and it becomes detrimental to their psychological health? Because I've seen that a lot.
I certainly see that, but that's where you need to be in touch with somebody who can give you some sanity around it.
Yeah. It's like, look, don't worry about this, and this. Measure this.
Right.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is there's a lot that gets solved by having high frequency. So if you have high frequency data, particularly if you're talking to somebody like me who gets high frequency data, I can tell you a lot of the markers I don't care that much about anymore, but did in the beginning. For example, fasting glucose, it's not that I don't care about it, but like say if I woke up with a 105, it would freak the prior me. I'd be like, what the hell? I'm insulin resistant now and diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. And now I have learned enough about adaptive glucose sparing that I go, no, I already know for the last upteenth fasted insulin tests, I'm running it around 5 or 4 milli-IU or less, right? And
I would be interested to see where my insulin is during this weight gain phase and where my cholesterol has been. Because the last time Last time I had measured it, I was trying to eat in more of a surplus, but I didn't gain that much weight. But in this phase, it's been much more smooth and just the routine that I found, right? So I think I wonder if my insulin levels are up right now because I'm eating a lot of, fat and significant amount of protein, but no carbohydrates. So I wonder what my insulin resistance levels are like to gain weight because I have gained some fat eating like this.
Right. I'm going to show you this. They'll really kind of bring the point home. So this is an example of, let's say I wake up, because this is what, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever. So I wake up with something like this.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up with a 101. And you can see by that line, it basically stretches back as a 101 while I'm sleeping for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And if I look back further into the longer graph, it's going to look like that big long straight line that I showed you about a little bit earlier, right?
Yep.
So let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's say that that's like 102, that my mean average blood glucose is 102 for 24 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that line. I've got no problem with hovering at 102, hardly moving at all for all that period of time, if that's what it was. Mm-hmm. And so that matters less to me between whether it was that or whether it was 92 or 82.
Yeah.
Than it does whether I have persistently increased insulin, because then that shows dysregulation.
Have you measured your hemoglobin A1C with that curve? What was it at when there was 101 consistently?
I believe my last A1C was 5.4, I think, which, by the way, doesn't match what you would expect to. So, for example,
you think it would be like 5.8 at that level, right, at 101?
No. I would think that if it was a mean average of 102, it should be like in the fours, I think.
Okay.
I may have to double check that. But that's because what it's accounting for is all of the spikes postprandial, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And here I am, I'm having no spikes postprandial.
Right.
Right? It's just leveling out. I feel, I could be wrong, but I feel that what we're looking at is a machine that's running at right about where it wants to keep. Again, it's acting on whether it's too high. It's acting on whether it's too low. It's not acting. It doesn't have to, right? Yeah. It's keeping just this like perfect, just absolutely level. It's almost like unreal when I look at it against other people's CGMs.
And especially against your own with the ketogenic diet, right? Your own on keto looks very different than your carnivore one.
Yeah, probably. I haven't had enough time with CGM that I've been able to see that outside of experiments.
Now you need another month washout.
Well, I just need more money. It's the CGM does have a G6 has some rent applied to it. We'll just put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, it's not cheap.
The sensors are expensive.
Yeah.
They're like $100 plus or something for 10 days.
If you're tuning in late, we got Dave Feldman after his 28-day carnivore experiment eating Smarties. No, bottle caps. Dextrose sugar candies. And monitoring his blood glucose, continuous blood glucose monitor. And he's
excited to get off it.
He's a little freaked out by the mountains he's seeing on the spikes there. But, man. So, all right. So after this experiment, what's next, Dave? Are you going to take your wife on a 6-month vacation, or are you going into another experiment?
So I have something that I may be doing in February that'll be unlike any experiment I've ever done. It'll be very public and it'll be very live if I decide to do it.
Whoa.
That's all I can tease it with.
Wow. Unlike anything.
It'll be that's all I can tease it with. I'll just say that it's something you'll definitely know about if it's happening.
So Dave's next experiment is going to be like nothing you've ever seen before. Every one of his previous experiments has been like nothing you've ever seen before as well. What is he going to do?
Well, you'll see if I decide if I'm going to do it in February. But if I do, you'll know about it for sure.
All right, Dave.
Well, but yeah, it's true. I do kind of have a hard stop coming up here in a second. But it's Tristan. It's always just a pleasure just chatting it up with you. I always have a lot of fun.
Likewise, Dave. You're always welcome to come back here. I think the audience probably got a lot out of this one. I think my audience has got a lot out of every single time you've come. And you're always dropping knowledge, and you're always have a very nice, nuanced approach to it, and you're so much more nice and polite than I am. So, Dave Feldman, thank you. We've had some good times. We talked about continuous glucose monitoring over a jar of rotting liver and hot dogs and bottle cap candies. So it's this has been awesome, man. This has been a Dave Feldman mukbang. You guys can find more at cholesterolcode.com, and make sure to subscribe to Dave's YouTube channel. Dave's got a YouTube channel, and he's also, I'm turning the video off on Skype real quick, Dave, because I'm not getting enough bandwidth. He's got a great YouTube channel. He also has a Patreon, because these experiments are not cheap, folks. I tell you what, not only are these experiments not cheap, but he's also putting his wife under quite a bit of stress. So make sure to check out Dave Feldman's Instagram. Or I'm sorry, you're on Instagram too, right? You're on Instagram?
Yeah,
Somewhat.
that's true. I'm not on it that often. It's like Dave Feldman Keto, I want to say, something like that.
At Dave Keto on Twitter. Dave Feldman on YouTube. And cholesterolcode.com. I'll put some links to his stuff in the pinned comment on this video. But any closing thoughts, Dave?
No, just as always, be mindful that cholesterol is dynamic. I never feel like I can say that enough. And always be sure to, research all sides, all major sides of anything. And lastly, I encourage anybody to experiment, but experiment responsibly.
There you go. Experiment responsibly.
Even if I don't.
Yeah, exactly. You remember your wife, everybody.
Yes, for sure.
All right, guys. Well, this has been a fun episode. Dave Feldman, cholesterolcode.com. Thanks for coming on, man.